Everybody, welcome to Highway 1093, Farm Market Road 1093. In case you don't know, this is Westheimer. Was once Farm Market 1093. And as we cross this railroad track, this is where all the black people were living back in the early 1900s on Farm Market Road 1093. The reason why it's Farm Market Road, because there was nothing out here but farming areas. I mean, nothing out here but cotton fields and places to raise your crops. It was all out up here on Farm Market Road 1093. And blacks were staying all back up in here in the early 1900s. And they start moving a little bit further out down Farm Market Road. And then that's what they call part of Janetta, Texas. And Janetta, Texas was just like a little small country town here in Harris County. But as you can see right now, blacks was living all back up in here in the early 1900s. In case you want to know where you're at, you're on Westheimer, going by the Galleria. That's right, blacks had all of this property back up in here. At one time, they were living back up in here. And then later on, the Italians came out here and built a market, a farmer's market right here on this corner where the Galleria is today, on the corner of Westheimer and Post Oak. But back during them days, it was Farm Market 1093, and it was always a Post Oak trail, because during them days they didn't have any streets. Everything was trails, because it was in the early 1900s before they came out with automobiles. And then they wasn't called streets, they were called roads. And as you can see, we're going down Highway 1093, which is Westheimer today. And over here was the famous Galleria. At one time, that was a farmer's market. And all up in here, at one time, were black people staying up in here, and you had a lot of cotton fields all back up in here. And blacks were staying all back up in here on Highway 1093, which was FM Farm Market Road 1093. And as you can see, that's the gallery. And all of this, at one time, blacks were staying back up in this area back in here in the early 1900s. As we go down FM 1093, which is Farm Market 1093, we want to also recognize the Weingarten family. As you can see, as we said in the earlier video, Weingarten do not sell any of their property. They lease out their property. And all of this, as you can see, is Weingarten Realty. Even across the street, as you look at the Galleria, Weingarten Realty. Those are the facts. Just figure I'd let you know this. As we go up and down Highway 1093, which we know it today as Westheimer, and there's again Weingarten Realty. The Weingarten family came out here in southwest Houston. At that particular time, part of Harris County, was not part of Houston, but was part of Harris County, and bought up a lot of property out here because they was giving away a lot of this farm area property, because it was swamp area. And a bunch of rice paddies out here, and the land was not developed yet. That's why you see so much Weingarten family out here on Highway 1093, which we know today as Westheimer. All right, everybody, we're right up here on this famous corner of Highway 1093, which we know it today as Westheimer, and the street called Thundering. The reason why we right up here, because this is where the blacks eventually wind up moving in the late 40s back out toward this way, because they had wanted to use more land to farm on. So they left the Westheimer area over there by the Galleria, and they moved west to come out here and start their farming out here. And by the 1940s and the late 1930s, most of the blacks was living out here, and they was buying land out here. And it then became part of Harris County and the city of Houston, and they went on and named this little part of Janetta, Texas, and named it a community called Piney Point, which a lot of blacks stayed out here in this area of Piney Point. But they could not go to school out here because they were surrounded with white people, and it was still a Jim Crow law. And right here is the main street of Janetta, Texas. That's why they call it Janetta, the street, because it's the only street that would run through Janetta, Texas, which was on the outbounds would be West Park and the main drag, which is right here, 1093. And we go down the street called Janetta. And once, like I say, this little area used to be called Janetta, Texas. And then it later on became Piney Point. And this is the main drag. It is the only street out here in Piney Point that would run from West Park to Westheimer. I mean, they would cross Richmond and come all the way to the highway. And blacks were staying all back up in here in the 40s and the 50s. In fact, when they were living out here, the blacks had to go to Jack Yates. If they wanted their high school diploma, they had a bus to come out here in Piney Point to take these black kids all the way to 3rd Ward to Jack Yates. And then in 1958, when they built Worthing, then the bus would take them all the way from Piney Point all the way to Sunnyside so they could go to Worthing. And all up in here was blacks area owned homes. These are some of the old black homes you could see up in here. Right up in here is so historical because black families, and you still see some of these black owned homes and property that some of the blacks never got rid of. And we're gonna go drive through here and show you. Those are some of the old homes out here. And all of that was considered as part of Thaddeus Williams them property and their homes. That's why they built them all next door so they all could live together. And Thaddeus Williams, he went to Jack Yates. The reason why he went to Jack Yates because he had his own automobile so he could go to Jack Yates. And Long Sexton also family came from out here. Piney Point is full of black rich history. The Laws family came from out here in Piney Point. The oldest child of the Laws family, which was Blanche, she had to go to Jack Yates because that was the only school that was available for her if she wanted a high school education. And the other sister, Eloise, she went to Jack Yates. The other brother, Hubert Laws, which was right under Blanche, he had some family that lived out in 5th Ward, and he went to Phyllis Wheatley and became part of the Jazz Crusaders. And by the time Ronnie Laws came in, he was bused to Worthing. And later on, the youngest daughter, Deborah Laws, school had integrated, and she went to Robert E. Lee. That's the history out here in Piney Point. And as we go down Janetta, Texas, and right up here, like I say, was the cutoff line, that's what you call West Park. On the other side of West Park was a railroad track, and on the other side of that railroad track was a little town called Claudine, Texas. I'm sorry. Let me go back to that. This is Thaddeus Williams them property. As you look over there, that's also part of Thaddeus Williams them property in the Williams family of a generation. See, those homes have been rebuilt, but they're still on the same property, and they're still out here in Piney Point. And the other part of that family down on the end was the Williams family, down on the other end, and right up here, like I said, was the cutoff. This was the end of the little small country town called Janetta, Texas. And this was one of the famous roads out here in Janetta, Texas, and blacks were staying all back up in here. This little street here called Osage. Blacks were staying back up in here. Here's another little small street out here called Waldo. Blacks were staying all back up in here. See, now these little streets here, they didn't go to the main drag, which is 1093. They didn't go that far. Only street that went to 1093 was Janetta. All of these streets was considered being part of the black community of Piney Point, all the way down to Gessner. That's why it was called Gessner Road. And at the end of Gessner Road was nothing but woods. But blacks were staying all back up in here. And most of these blacks that were staying up in here, like I say, in the early 50s, they had to go to Jack Gates. But in the late 50s, they built Worthing. The buses would take them to Ebony Worthing High School until they got integrated. Once they got integrated, then they could go to Robert E. Lee. But before 1968, all these blacks had to go to black schools, which the buses would take them to Worthing. They could go to Yates if they had their own transportation and had family members that lived in 3rd Ward. But if they did not, they would have to go to Worthing. And right here was the cutoff line of Piney Point in the black community. Because on the other side of Gessner Road was nothing but woods. And if you wanted to go to hit the highway, you had two ways to get to Highway 1093. You could come down Gessner Road, or you could go down Janetta Street. And then we've seen all of those little roads going down West Park, and you saying, wondering where they going to? Okay, they coming to right here. This is the cutoff line, Richmond Road. Because they could not go to FM 1093, which was Westheimer. They did not go that far. The only way you could get to the Highway 1093 is, like I say, through Janetta Street. And all up in here was nothing but little black homes and little shotgun houses all back up in here. We're talking about the early 40s. And all back up in here, people would sell wood. You see all this land, a lot of people, because wood was a big factor back during them days. Yes, selling wood was that was a big commodity, because everything was done by wood. They didn't have no electricity. You had wood to burn your food. You had wood to stay warm. So wood was a big commodity up and down here on Richmond Road in Piney Point. And I will show you one of the Woodheader Street. See, as you can see, to let you know, firewood. All back up in here used to be little places where you could buy firewood. Now the only place you use firewood now is for barbecuing, since they have electric stove now and electric heaters, central heaters. And all back up in here, people, black stayed back up in here. All this was considered as black area of Piney Point. And on the other side of Westheimer, which is 1093, was white people stayed over on the other side of Piney Point. Now you're going back towards Memorial. But all back up in here, as you can see, where you could buy wood. And the only main drag street that went through to the highway was Janetta. And one of the reasons why they're naming Janetta, to recognize that one time the little town was called Janetta, Texas.